What's going on, everybody? Tyler Austin here, founder and CEO of REISift. And in today's video, I'm going to teach you guys the complete guide to skip tracing. What you need to do when you get your data, what you need to do when you go to market, and then what you need to do as you continue to market to make sure those skip tracing dollars, which are very valuable to your company, go as far as possible, meaning that when we spend money in our marketing, that money increases and gives us the best return on investment, which is what we really care about inside of our companies: net profits, return on investments, and it all boils down to how we handle the flow of that data. And I'm going to teach you guys at the very end of this how we set up a process in our company so that we don't ever have to really think about this process and this flow. It just kind of happens organically because we do things the right way around here in our companies. And I appreciate you being here. If you're brand new, don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if in fact it is valuable to you. Leave a comment below. Any questions you got, we'll answer them, and let's get to the video. First and foremost, before we get into the actual process flows of doing skip tracing in your company, I want to talk a little bit about what skip tracing even is. So skip tracing is the ability for you to take information, pass that information through a system, and receive back additional information from said system. It's not just when you're paying for it, it's also when you're doing it manually. So if you were to go and, let's just say, Google someone's name, and it pops up with a free resource and it shows their address and their phone numbers. Like, you technically just did a manual skip trace, okay? But it's just, through free. But obviously there's paid systems as well to be able to expedite this, especially at bulk. When you're doing tons and tons and tons of records, it's easier to run it through a system, than to do all that stuff manually, okay? But it doesn't mean that doing it manually is lesser than doing it through a system because of the way that skip tracing functions through the providers. And let's explain that a little bit so that you understand if you're not getting results, for example, from skip tracing and cold calling vacants. If you understand where the data comes from, it'll help you understand why maybe you're not getting those results. And the biggest example I want to use is with vacant properties. So let's just say, for example, we do skip tracing and we want to target vacant properties. So we select vacant properties, we send them off to a skip tracing provider, and we get back phone numbers, and then we cold call those phone numbers, and we don't get any results. We're like, well, we're not getting very many leads. These are supposed to be really motivated prospects, right? Because the properties are vacant. Why wouldn't they want to sell? But I'm not reaching anybody. If you think about the fundamentals of skip tracing, what it is it's typically you're using the mailing address, because the mailing address is what people are inputting when they're applying for credit cards, when they're getting car loans, mortgages, things like that. So if the provider that you're using is pulling credit bureau data, and that credit bureau, when they applied for that credit, used the mailing address of where they receive mail because they want to receive their invoices, they want to receive their billing statements at that address, that address is what's going to be associated with their phone number and their contact information within the credit bureau. So for example, just to give a use case, Tyler goes out and he buys a TRX, okay, which hopefully is going to happen. Can't find one. Nevertheless, I go buy a TRX and Tyler applies for a loan against the TRX, okay? I'm gonna put my mailing address, I'm gonna put my phone number, and now the credit bureau has that new information. So when somebody goes to skip trace one of my rental properties, and my rental property has my home address instead of my PO box, for example, as the address, it's gonna run through the credit bureau, and the credit bureau is gonna now have an updated address with my phone number, and I'm gonna have relatively good, results on my skip tracing. But if Tyler uses a PO box, or maybe Tyler hasn't lived at that mailing address for years, it might not pull accurate phone numbers because I haven't been there. It's been vacant. I moved, to Alaska and went to the woods and been there for 6 years, or maybe I passed away and it has my mailing address as my old home address, but I haven't lived there. There's been 3 families in that home since then, and now it's vacant. So that's why you end up having lack of results, right? So if you understand this, through knowledge, we can manipulate knowledge in order to increase our yield and our results. And I want you to understand the purpose and how skip tracing works, right? And earlier I mentioned how you could go to a free resource and get results that maybe you don't get through a paid resource. And the reason for that is Tyler might not go out and apply for a credit card, right? He might not go out and buy a TRX. He might not do those things. So therefore the credit bureau does not have my information. However, Tyler does like free coupons. And so he puts his phone number and his information online on some random website to get a free coupon. And the bots that scrape through the internet, because once something's in the internet, it's in the internet. And that information gets scraped and now it's in a public directory. And I'm like, dude, I never even have a credit card. So sometimes the free information has the results that we wanted, even though the paid information does not. So it's important to create a process so that you don't lose opportunity simply because you don't know. And that's what I'm gonna teach you today. So that's why skip tracing is important. That's a little bit about skip tracing. It enables us to be able to get a hold of sellers for cheaper by having a phone number. And then we can create a sequential process in order to market to those individuals more expensive marketing strategies if we can't reach them on the phone, okay? Let's go ahead and move on and talk a little bit about the 4 primary steps of skip tracing itself. I wanted to make this really simple for us, so I really narrowed it down actually to 3 different processes for skip tracing properly. Okay, that's an important piece of this is properly, because a huge part of skip tracing is the data that you put in. What you put in is what you're gonna get out, okay? So there's certain things you wanna do. Number 1, clean your lists. If you just buy a list from somewhere, you download a list from your county, and you do not first prepare that list for skip tracing, you will waste money. I promise you. You're gonna get less accurate results because let's just say you skip trace something where the first name is with an initial, like it's like T Austin instead of Tyler Austin on the property, which happens all the time, especially with properties that have multiple people on the deed. Cleaning your list is really important. We do have a video on how to do that, but REISift does a lot of that cleaning for you. It pushes everything from clean to incomplete so that you can just select your clean records. So definitely check that out. Number 2, use a smart skip tracing tool. Skip tracing can either be kind of like caveman-y. It could be old in nature. It could be essentially where it just runs it through and kicks it back, and it only, for example, might only give you back what got results, not what didn't get results. You don't want that. You want to know what did not get results, because if you didn't get results through that skip tracing in that provider, you want to be able to try a second provider, or you want to be able to send out those people direct mail. Some of my highest direct mail campaign return on investments have been from only sending direct mail to those that I didn't get skip trace results from. It's a really amazing tactic, and you can create a system to make this flow really simply in your business. The other thing with smart skip tracing actually is the mailing address. So if that mailing, let's say you have a list of 1,000 prospects, and let's say there's the same person that owns 50 properties inside those 1,000, which happens all the time. In fact, I'll show you in my account. I just skip traced 497 records this morning, a deceased list. I think it was 497. And there was 32 owners that owned at least 2 or more properties. So I ended up saving in REISift skip tracing, because it's a smart skip tracing tool. I ended up saving $4.12 on my skip tracing simply because when we skip traced it, we seen that information existed. We made sure that we only skip traced that owner one time, and we shared that information across the other properties. So that's really important, okay? Third, make sense of the data. You can skip trace stuff all day, but if you just skip trace it and then just blast through cold calling it and you don't make sense of the results of that, you might as well just send direct mail. You might as well just do something else, because one of the biggest things with skip tracing and phone numbers is you gotta maintain the phone numbers. What you do not wanna do is you don't wanna skip trace something and then maybe a week later, after you call through the list, you skip trace it again, and some of those numbers are the same. In one provider versus another provider, you're gonna get some of the same numbers, but in your cold calling efforts initially, that same phone number was a wrong number, or it was a dead number, or something like that. And now you skip traced it a second time, and you just recalled it, or you retexted it, or you resent a RVM on it, and you already know that that's not the correct number. That is something that will cost you tons and tons and tons of money in your company. I mean, quadruple, 8 times, 10 times. If you have 10 phone numbers from a prospect from the skip tracing provider, or even only 3 phone numbers, if only one of them is technically the correct number, and which, by the way, in most cases, about 50% of the numbers that you get back from skip tracing are dead to begin with, no matter what the provider is, okay? And at any rate though, out of 10, one of them should theoretically be correct, maybe two, okay? Because maybe it's one's for a sibling or a brother, who knows, right? That means the other 8 or 9, you don't want to have to remarket to. And if you do, you're going to end up costing yourself 8 or 9 times the marketing cost. So making sure that when you skip trace and you go marketing to it, as you market, every time that you call a number, that number's being updated centrally so that you can bolster your campaigns as you continue to market. You're continuing to spend less and less and less, and you're gaining more insight on your skip traces. So you know that after X amount of marketing attempts, we can go ahead and skip trace these records maybe at a different provider, but when we combine that data together, we are only going to be left with the numbers that are brand new, so that we don't remarket to numbers that were dead or wrong or DNCs and stuff like that, okay? And I'm gonna show you guys a little bit about that here in a minute. But let's talk about the process, okay? Because the process is really important. You can have this, and I kind of covered the process a little bit, but you can have this flow, but if you don't build a process around it and you don't actually, make that process something you do consistently, the best way that I recommend to be able to gain control of it is choose one type of data that you work weekly. For example, we work deceased data weekly, we work code enforcements weekly, we work tax auctions weekly, and probates actually. So a few different types of lists, okay? We pull that data in weekly, we put it into the process, we know what numbers were never skip traced. In fact, that list that I pulled this morning is 490 some records, like I said. Out of those, 237, I believe, and I'll show you in my account, 297 or something like that, already had phone numbers from other lists inside of my REISift account. So I didn't have to worry about skip tracing those again. So that in itself just saved me a bunch of money, okay? So the process is important. How you bring data in, what you do with it next, and then how you market to it, and then what you do after you market to it is fundamentally the core process of what an acquisitions company or a marketing company does the right way, okay? So process, so let's talk a little bit about that process, right? Data in, all right? You clean your data, make sure you only skip trace clean data. You skip trace the data that's clean. Meanwhile, any of that other incomplete data, we can kind of clean it up over time. And then two things are gonna happen. When you skip trace it, you're gonna get results for some. The stuff that you get results for, you're gonna end up sending off to marketing, okay? And there's a whole nother flow I'm gonna show you guys that you wanna do there, okay? So that's gonna go off to marketing. The stuff that you do not get results from on that first skip tracing attempt, you wanna skip trace again, okay? But you're gonna skip trace in a different provider, okay? Because we still wanna try and get those phone numbers. We're gonna skip trace in a different provider, and then the same question comes, okay? Did I get results or did I not get results? The stuff that I did not get results for, 2 times in a row, 2 different providers, there's a good chance I'm not gonna get phone numbers from any provider from it, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna kick off direct mail to those. It's typically gonna be a very slim amount. For me, it was 9 of those, like 497 records this morning that ended up being this scenario where it was 2 times skip trace, no results, okay? So I kicked it off direct mail. We'll see what happens. And meanwhile, everything else I can market to. I got phone numbers for it, and I'm gonna market to it 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, and there's a whole process behind that, which you can continue to learn if you subscribe to our YouTube channel as we produce even more content. And check out the Sensei Flow. Again, the description of that will be in, the link for that will be in the description. A really great process and flow to make sure that that weekly data you're bringing in is being nurtured and hit and managed properly from prospect all the way to lead, all the way to a contract and revenue in your company. That's the process. That's really a high overview process, okay? Let's try and zoom out. You're not gonna be able to see it, but it's so I can read it. Process data in, we clean the data, we skip trace the clean data. Anything we get results for, we're gonna go ahead and kick off to a marketing campaign. As we market, we're gonna update those phone numbers real time. And then we're going to go ahead and re-skip trace the stuff we don't get results from that first time to a second provider. If we don't get results in the second time, that's what we're gonna kick direct mail. And this is like that typical really bulk marketing. Like we're bringing in a boatload of data or even weekly data and smaller lists. We're marketing to it in bulk, updating it real time. And this is how companies, that even do just massive cold calling can really streamline and save a ton of money in their marketing by doing this process. But it can also be used for people that are only getting like 150 or 200 records. So over time, as you scale, you should be doing both. You should be hitting those niche records weekly and also hitting that bulk data The difference is what tools you use, Calltools or ZenCall for the bulk dialing, AirCall, or some other click-to-call tool for the single line dialing, so that we can make sure that we're keeping up and hitting all of our data with the right, respect that it deserves based off of the value of the prospect, okay? So now let's go ahead and move over, and I'm gonna show you guys how you can set up this process. If you're an REISift user, you can set this up right now. If you're not an REISift user, you're gonna be able to see the power of how REISift can actually hold this process, hold your hand in this, so that you can make sure that you have the most optimal operation, and you can increase that revenue by simply saving money. You might not have to get 5 deals a month. You might be able to just get 2 deals a month, but spend a lot less, but still do all the right things. And then you can scale on top of that and just continue to just make insane net profits, okay? All right, so now we're inside of my REISift account, and what I've done is I've actually created a scenario. All right, I went to Propstream and I just simply grabbed a list of deceased records. You see, okay, it was 489 records, okay? I did this morning. As an example, I created a whole separate list. Typically, these are under my pre-probate list, but I created a whole separate list. I uploaded them so that I can make sure that you guys can see a real live example of how I literally did this in my real estate investment company here just this morning. Okay, so 489 records. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and show you my activity on my uploads. I'm gonna show you that when I uploaded those, because I had all this other data in my account, there was 216 of those that were new records, and there was 273 that were already inside my REISift account. So because I bring new data into my company, remember data in, I want to be able to create a flow which you can utilize filter presets for, which is essentially the ability to filter our data and then save it as a preset so that we can create flows, okay? And then you can just use a flow chart through like Lucid Charts or charts.io to be able to create this process in your business to document it. But I'm gonna show you an example here, okay? And just stick with me, especially those that are already REISift users, you guys are more familiar with this, but if you're not, okay, then just look at this and think about how well it would be if somebody just had exactly a button to click and everything just worked, okay? So I intake new data into my company, and I'm going to look at what needs skipped. So you can see I have a filter preset here called deceased needs skipped. And if I look at that preset, you can see I'm filtered by my deceased list, and I have it set to where I have numbers no, skip trace no. And if I click apply, right now I have none. Reason being is because I already skip traced them this morning, right? So right now, if I were to upload another list next week, okay, to my deceased list, what's gonna happen is if I don't have any phone numbers for those records, they're gonna pop up here. There's gonna be maybe 1, 2, 3, 5, 100 records, who knows? They're gonna pop up here. Okay, so cool, easy enough. I skip trace them. You can see I actually have some 2 incomplete records that could be cleaned, which would push them over to clean, and then I'd be like, oh cool, I have 2 records to clean or to skip trace. After you skip trace it, what I've done is I've also created another filter preset for deceased one-time skipped, NN for no numbers. Okay, and what this is filtered by the deceased list, and it says skip trace no, or numbers no, but skip trace yes, meaning that REISift knows that it's been attempted to be skip traced, but it doesn't have any phone numbers. If I click apply on those, you can see that I have 9 records that fit that criteria. So these need to be skip traced in a second location, okay? And then I'm gonna upload them and I'm gonna try that and see how many comes back then, okay? So that's the second thing. But meanwhile, there's some stuff that did get results from my skip tracing, right? That would be the deceased ready to market. Ready to market, okay, means that, hey, these have phone numbers, okay, their status isn't updated, numbers, yes, and I click apply and you can see that I have 472 properties that are ready to market to right now. And what's cool is you can actually see that some of these were skip traced 276 days ago. And if I open this record, I'm gonna show you guys my activity log. Just remember, this is my account, so this pretty little thing you see at the top isn't there. But you can see when I uploaded this was August 18th, and it updated all this information on that record. Okay, really, really convenient. And I can look at the owner here. I see they only own 1 property. okay, but they're on the deceased list, tax delinquent list, it's a multifamily property, and an unknown sale date, okay? So it's a really good prospect. Don't steal my prospects, y'all, okay? But you can see I haven't even called or reached this person yet. The status is still blank. So these are the people I want to market to. After I market to this person one time, what's going to happen is they're going to end up being pushed to my deceased attempt 1, okay? So we tag it, and there's a whole Sensei Flow process that you guys can click in the description below, the Sensei Flow flow. But what we do is for our deceased list and our weekly list, we Sensei Flow all of that data, and then any of that tier 2 data, definitely check out the data priority video that we have on our YouTube channel. All of that would get in a bulk dialer. Okay, but what you can see at its core, at minimum, the efficiency of intaking data into my company and then simply being able to click on what needs skip traced, boom, skip trace all those records, and then simply come over here and you would say, okay, cool, everything's done skip tracing. I uploaded it, whatever, I skip traced inside of REISift. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to look at what's ready to be marketed to. Fantastic, all this stuff needs marketed to. And let's just say you're doing a bulk dialer and you send this to one of our integrations. Let's say you send it to Calltools. When you send it to Calltools, maybe you add a tag to it, and that tag is attempt A01. And if this needs marketed to, you're gonna say, hey, do not include anything that is attempt A01. So now it's no longer gonna be underneath of this filter view. Much like if I were to click on my Sensei attempt A01, you can see that I'm saying, okay, I wanna see all records that have the tag Sensei attempt 1, but do not have attempt 2 or attempt 3. And if I apply that right now with this data, we don't have any because we haven't marketed to the needs marketed to yet. But once we call through that list one time, as my team is calling, they're adding the tag Sensei attempt 1, which is gonna move it from this record, okay? And after it moves it from that filter, what's gonna happen is now it's gonna be ready for attempt A02. So once they call through it a second time, attempt A02 is gonna get tagged, and at that point, it would be under this filter. So essentially what you're doing is you're using these filter presets to quite literally, as you bring data into your company, you're using it to know what you need to skip trace. You're using it to know where the data is in its life cycle of your company, because after you've tried to market to it, let's say 10 times, maybe you want to re-skip trace it, or maybe you want to do something else. So you would have essentially a filter preset for that data so that you kind of start building this bucket. So this is called data segmentation. You're moving it through your data. And it doesn't matter if it's only 500 records or if it's 10,000 records or 50,000, 100,000. We have users that are marketing to hundreds of thousands of records every single month. Cold calling, and they do this flow. And we have users that are marketing into 10 records a month. And they still use the same exact flow. It doesn't matter where you're at scale. Skip tracing is skip tracing, and how you need to handle the results of that is really important. Some other things, for example, is like, let's take this record, for example. This number right here, if it was tagged as wrong number, okay, when I go to, re-skip trace this record here, when I re-upload that data, I wouldn't want to re-market to this. And in REISift, when you upload that, that list of new skip trace records, if this phone number is in there, it's going to see its wrong number, and it's going to merge those two together so that when you go to market to this record, you're going to only send, untagged numbers rather than wrong numbers. So you want to update those phone numbers real time. So after you get done marketing, you can see who you've reached and who you haven't reached. So you don't spend marketing dollars on, bad numbers, okay? So that's another thing. All right. On that note, let's look at our skip trace activity so I can show you what I was talking about earlier about the saved revenue. So I ended up sending 332 properties to skip tracing, and 298 owners ended up being in there, which means there was 34 duplicate owners. And so if there was 34 duplicate owners, that means that 34 of those owners owned at least 2 or more properties when I went to go skip trace, which ultimately saved me about $4 and some change. If you do that and you skip trace, 400 this week, 400 next week. I mean, we're talking about a whole subscription. We're talking, 50, 100, 200. Some users that are skip tracing, tens of thousands of records every single month are saving hundreds of dollars a month just by using that kind of skip tracing functionality. And then on top of that, they're saving hundreds and thousands of dollars a month by making sure that they're tagging their records and then only marketing back to the records that they haven't reached yet and the phone numbers they haven't reached yet. And the savings just continue to stack up, right? What you're saving by doing it the right way stacks up dramatically. And that's why REISift is really unlocking a coupon to your business. So if you have any questions at all, definitely reach out to the team. If you ever want to wonder where all these articles are located, simply go under our landing page, reisift.io, go under Learn, and then click on the blogs and updates. And that's going to take you over to our blog where you can listen to some of our podcast episodes and success stories and stuff. And then also you can read all of the different articles that we're publishing to help you guys be able to learn more and really just be more profitable in your business, turning more prospects to leads and more leads to revenue. And that's our ultimate goal, right? You need to be in here creating tasks. And meanwhile, let me check to see what's going on with my team, see how many tasks we got going on. We got a bunch of overdue ones that we need to catch up on. Not too many, actually. Let's see. We got 31 overdue tasks, so we'll work those out. Most of those are me, actually. So can't really hate my team for that, but I gotta get myself together. But anyway, if you guys have any questions, reach out. That is a little bit of an overview. As simple as it is, check the links in the description, apply this into your company, and hopefully this video was valuable to you. I know that sometimes they can get a little bit longer than some of our other videos, but that's simply because we're telling you a lot of the things that mostly everybody else will not, because we care about the true success in your companies, not just you being an REISift user, but you truly being able to succeed in your business so that you can continue to grow with us and we can continue to grow with you. And I appreciate you guys being here. If you're new again, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit that like button, comment below with any questions that you have so we can give you the resources that we have available to you to make sure that you're successful in this flow and in this process. Thanks again. Hopefully this complete guide to skip tracing was useful, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.